Hello and you're welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler, the tech editor of the Irish and Sunday Independent. Now, we're talking about weather and weather apps in particular because in the last 4 to 6 weeks, you think you're going to have a couple of hours of sunshine. You hang the washing out, you go out for a walk with the dog. 20 minutes later, it's not just rain, it's hailstones. And people are relying an awful lot on their phones' apps and they're starting to ask, look, what the hell is going on here? Like, why is my iPhone app so wrong so much of the time? Well, to talk a little bit about this, I'm joined by Alan O'Reilly, who anyone who's online on social media will know him from his tag of Carlo Weather, because that's what his main passion in life is. He's also his day job as a customer experience manager in Black Knight. But Alan O'Reilly, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Adrian.
So this is something that we've spoken about. I wrote about it during the week as well. Apps, the apps on your phones. Why are they getting it wrong relatively often?
Well, especially at the moment, we have a weather setup which is quite tricky to forecast, to be fair. But the problem with a lot of apps is obviously they're automated. So most of them have no manual input, but they're also using different weather models. And some of them are using lower resolution weather models.
What does that mean? What does lower resolution mean?
So I suppose if you think about each of Ireland broken up into squares and what size those squares are. So the lower resolution has about a square of about 28 kilometers wide. So there's only that many squares over Ireland. The higher resolution has a square which is 2.5 kilometers. So
That's a
more
big
squares.
difference.
It's a huge difference. It's kind of like, I was comparing it to SD and HD. It's kind of like looking at a picture that's in low resolution, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at a picture that's in high resolution. And the difference there is obviously very different. So
Yeah, but the SD picture will still tell you or show you roughly what's going on in the area. It's just that it'll be fuzzy. With some of the apps, like 28 kilometers, I could be at the bottom of a hill and, 15 kilometers across the way, it might be lashing rain. I might see the sun. I mean, that's quite a wide area, isn't it? 28
it,
kilometers?
it is, but again, as you said, it's a general picture. So like the SD will give you a general overview. So,
Mm.
if everywhere is shown clear blue skies and sunshine for the whole of Ireland, then it's not really as important. But when you get this kind of mixed weather and you have a low pressure system and you're trying to predict where is this band of rain going to hit or where is the strong winds going to hit, then it makes a huge difference. So we could say rain is going to move in from the west, but it could be that it hits, Galway, but misses Mayo.
Mm.
And if you're looking at the
That
lower
never
resolution,
happens, by the way. I can tell you from first-hand experience. But go on.
but if
Although, small point, last year, Balmullet, which is the place I go to in Northwest Mayo, which nobody knows, but it's actually a beautiful place, supposed to be the wettest place in Ireland. In 2020, I believe, it was the sunniest place in Ireland.
yeah, and you get these massive variants. Like a recent example, 21 degrees in Kerry, 11 degrees in Dublin.
Hmm.
Now, you get these big
I know, and then
variants.
we can start getting all the Kerrymen with their, the Costa of Ireland and all this
Yeah,
stuff.
but going back to the weather model of low resolution versus high resolution, when you're trying to forecast for your area, and that's partly, I think, the problem with these apps is it uses GPS a lot of the time to pinpoint your location.
Hmm.
So it kind of gives you a sense of that in this particular part of your county in Ireland, this forecast is for you. So it kind of gives you a sense of, oh, so this is for Tullow in County Carlow, not
Hmm.
Carlow Town, not Bagenalstown, and makes you think that it's for that area. And it can be, in fairness, when it's on the high
But it's
res.
kind of tricking you, is what you're saying. It has detected your exact area from your location, your phone's location. It's not
Yes,
saying that it is delivering to you a pinpoint weather forecast for that location.
exactly. And on the lower resolution, when you're looking at, especially beyond a couple of days, really and truly, you could be within 100 kilometers, and it's
Yeah.
not going to make that much of a difference.
I mean, I think really what gets most people go really is the next few hours, the next 1, 2, 5, 6, 7 hours when they're about to go out somewhere. They're wondering should they bring, their coat with them. And the iPhone and Samsung phones, they use slightly different default preloaded apps because this is one of the things I looked into, and the iPhone's app uses the weather company, which used to be the Weather Channel. It's now actually a division of IBM. And I looked their information up, and they appear to use this wide area that you spoke about, like 15, 20, 28 kilometers or so. You go into Met Éireann's app, so I asked Met Éireann about this. They say that their measurement Contrary to the preloaded apps on phones, if you download their app, it's 2.5 kilometers across. So they're way more precise.
Yeah. Now the only caveat there is that's only for about 48 hours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So for the
Yeah.
next 48 hours,
Yeah.
for the next 2 days, but that's still a big advantage. I
Oh,
mean,
it's massive.
if you're on a Friday and you're looking ahead for the weekend, to be
Mhm.
able to more accurately say that Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning is going to be a nice clear day, or at least it's not going to be raining,
Yeah.
it's huge to me.
It is, no, it is, and that short range weather forecasting has really improved, and that's where the Harmony model, which feeds that information into the Air app, is really really good, and it really does have a much better handle on what's going to happen. So as you say, if you're Thursday or Friday and you're thinking about barbecue on a Saturday, it's really going to have a really good handle on what weather is coming. However, if you try and look at it maybe on Monday or Tuesday and plan that a little bit further out, well, then you're using the ECMWF, which is the European weather model, which while it is a very good weather model, it doesn't have the same low res or high resolution. So it is a lower resolution model. So that's
And
why,
just again to repeat, when you say low resolution, what you mean is it's a wider area.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it can't give the same detailed outlook that, that's for 2.5 kilometer square basically. And the problem there is that's where people get frustrated. At least a lot of people message me is I'm looking at my weather
Mm.
app and it's changing every day because it's shown that it was going to be sunny. Now it's saying rain. And really and truly, it really does depend on what app, what weather model, and how far out you are, but also the weather setup. If we have a big high pressure, then you can confidently say, this is what it's going to be. But when you have
Mm.
showers, like we have really heavy thundery downpours at the moment, but we also have, like, I have a friend who sent me a picture from a beach in the west of Ireland enjoying the sunshine, and it was absolutely lashing rain in Carlow.
Mm.
So when you have setups like that, no app, no weather model is going to be able to tell you exactly where the shower hits, and that's where the weather radar comes into play. So that's recording what's happening with the rain now. It's picking up, it's detecting the rainfall, and you can see if you play the animation, you can see which way the showers are moving and developing. And that's really, if you're thinking about heading out for a walk, it's the
Mm.
radar you should be checking really.
One of the things that frustrates me about Med app, and so the top five apps in both app stores are Med is either always one or two. It's currently number one in the iPhone App Store, number two in Android. The Weather app, which is for the iPhone, comes preloaded, so therefore is used a lot. Weather and Radar UK, Ireland, both for Android and iPhone. YOR, which I think is a Norwegian
Yeah.
app, for free for iPhone and Android, and an AccuWeather. The the thing about Met app is, even with all this technical advantage in terms of accuracy, it's clunky. I find it clunky too. You mentioned the radar
Mm-hmm.
feature there. You mentioned the animation. Fantastic. When I go on to Met rainfall radar animation, its default animations to show me what's happened in the last 2 hours up to now.
Mm-hmm.
Useless. I mean, that's useless to me. Unless I want to historically know, I want to know whether my garden's been watered. You know, and the one thing I do find with the MedAiron app is there are bits of it that just are kind of not that well put together. Their remit, I don't think, is the same remit as the other apps. The other apps all have millions of dollars behind them in terms of design and user interface. The MedAiron app, well, is it for farmers? Is it for professional fishermen? Is it for other meteorological organizations? You open the app and it shows you, the different forecasts for the different provinces, national forecasts. And to me, it's kind of tricky and hard to get to my area. Like, I'd love to, if it, here's my 2.5 kilometers. This is what I want to know, you know?
Yeah, and funnily enough, some of those things you've said there, people have messaged me, and I have no association with MedAiron, but I've actually been telling people how to use the app quite a bit
Hmm.
because people have been struggling even to find a menu to try and find some of the forecast maps. And I think people find the website pretty good now. Originally, I think a lot of people were kind of finding it hard, but they're trying to find the same thing on the app and they're struggling with it. And also, I know one frustration for a lot of people was that if it couldn't locate your GPS, or if you didn't allow it to locate your GPS, it always defaulted to Dublin. And that
Mm,
used to really frustrate people who are not in Dublin,
mm.
because it used to, instead of asking you to input your location, it would just assume that we'll just default to Dublin. Now, obviously, you can change it and you can search. And to be fair, the search is quite good, but it is a little bit clunky. I think the home screen is trying to show you too many things
Yeah, it
rather
is. It
than giving
is.
you the basics and then letting you go from there,
I
really.
mean, I remember when Yahoo Weather was first introduced, and its big advantage over the others was nothing to do with accuracy. It was to do with the animations and the way it was presented. It was really
Mhm.
nice. The animations were really, really nice. It'd been well thought through. I mean, to be fair to developers, the app developers, there are 100 different decisions that they have to make. I think the Met Éireann app kind of shows the difficulty there when you can't compete with Yahoo or AccuWeather or these
Mhm.
giant organizations that have very sophisticated tech teams and app developers. But even still, it's just a shame because in the App Store, the Met Éireann app has a 2.8 rating, which isn't great,
Mm.
to be honest.
I think it's trying to be all things to all people as well.
Mm.
So as you said, fishermen, farmers, general, like there's a lot of information in there, and some people will really want to get into the nitty gritty and look at different things.
Right.
But there's a large general population that just want the forecast and they just want to see what it is. And if they figure out how to use a rain radar and how to read that and how to look at it, well, then if they have the option of clicking in to find it, that's fine. But really and
Yeah.
truly, I mean, the beauty of the weather app is you open it, it gives you what it is at the moment, and then it shows you what's going to happen hour by hour. And it's pretty simple, really. Now, how accurate it is, then that becomes the problem, really. So it's a trade-off, and as you say, it's about that balance of the UX versus the data, and one is only as good as the other, because if you have all the data and it's really accurate, but you don't have the UX design then to allow people to, I suppose, explore it and get it easily, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, exactly. And again, just this isn't a Met Éireann bashing session. To be fair, once again, their remit is much broader
Mhm.
than the remit of these other weather apps, and they do professional associations that depend on them for, they would argue, much more important things
Mhm.
than just whether I'm going to get a bit of soggy on my walk with the dog. Um, just in terms of what you do, I've known you as Carlo Weather online and offline. Why did you get into meteorology?
Snow, actually, funnily enough, was the main reason. I have a real interest from when I was younger. Why would it snow? Why didn't it snow? And trying to kind of forecast that. And I started looking at different things. And then in 2008, I bought a weather station. And that time,
What
kind
is a
of,
weather station?
so it really just records the simple, weather, what's happening at the moment. So your basic things like temperature, wind speed, wind direction, rainfall, measuring rainfall, your barometer, humidity, and then it gets a bit technical, and then it gets into what's called a dew point, which is actually a calculation
A
based on a few of
dew
those.
point,
Dew
like
point, yeah.
dew, like
It's the temperature
dew on
which
the.
water will turn basically from the air into moisture. So when the dew point drops to a certain temperature, you're much more likely to have snow fall from the sky rather than rain. So that kind of trying to find a dew point for your area is not that easy, but when you have your own weather station, you can do it. But also then I decided to set up the website because I work for Black Knight, so websites, now I wasn't working with them at the time, but still involved in IT and stuff. So I set up carweather.com, and I thought it was really interesting that I could see the weather in my back garden every 60 seconds live on a website. Because and even still a lot of the updates, like Met Éireann's main national update from the weather stations is only once an hour on met.ie. So all of the weather stations, so the Oak Park weather station in Carlow, every hour it updates and tells me what the last hour was, what the max wind was, what the temperature was. So you're kind of left waiting every hour for an update. So when a storm is coming, or when you have some interesting weather in terms of snow and that, you're waiting for an hour, as we're every 60 seconds. So in 2010, my station recorded minus 17.7 because it's in a bit of
Mhm.
a frost hollow, which was the coldest temperature in the country. So it kind of got a bit of interest, and I think it was an online boards picked it up, and everyone was looking at this temperature dropping every 60 seconds. So it kind of got a bit of interest from there, and then I basically started the social media. So the weather station does its thing. I don't really do a whole lot with it. It automatically just records and updates the website. So then I started reading weather charts and kind of doing forecasts, and that's really where the social media comes from, because I try and deliver the information and I show the charts, and then I try and break it down into kind of layman's terms. And you know, you're going to be able to get the washing out tomorrow. The farmers are going to be able to spray the fields, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing, isn't it? Because I look at some of those weather charts, including one or two that you post, and I'm kind of struggling to make head nor tail of them. Like, there always seems to be a load of random triangles floating about, pointing in these weird directions. Then somebody said, "Oh, watch out! There's a high pressure." Well, is a high pressure not good? No, no. Oh, look, there's a low pressure. That's even worse. You
Yeah.
know,
And
and the color coding as well is sometimes odd as well. Like, I'm never sure whether if something the darker some is it means warmer or colder.
yeah, a lot of people mention that. Is red good or is red bad? Because
Yeah,
obviously a red warning means, you know, really
red's
serious
bad,
weather.
but
That's really
then
bad.
kind of orange is kind of is lightly warmer, so maybe that's good.
Yeah, so when it really depends on what the chart is. And as you said, most people don't read the charts. They're not as nerdy about the weather as I am, so they don't read the charts. So, but the reason I put them there is to kind of show people that this is what it's based off. And some people
Mm.
can kind of grasp it, but it's more really, I suppose, to show that, you know, sometimes like the difference, I suppose, between what I do and what my Aaron does is that I will talk about what might happen. So,
Mm.
for example, if the
Do you
weather
ever
chart,
use the term hectopascal
no,
or
don't you?
isobar? You know, I suspect there's people over a certain age in Ireland, I'd say over the age of, say, 35, 40, are familiar with an awful lot of the language around weather without having a clue what an isobar, hectopascal, because we all sat there watching the 6 o'clock or the 9 o'clock news. We all sat there during the weather report afterwards. We
Mhm.
listened to these terms, you know, drifting slowly, something's rising. There's some station in Belmullet saying that something's about to happen. It
Yeah.
reminds me a little bit when I was a kid. We'd listen to the radio, and a lot of the ads in Morning Ireland were actually farming ads. So you'd have ads about, you know, the danger of liver fluke, right? Now, I still don't really know what a liver fluke is, but I could kind of chat to you about it, you know, in terms of how best to treat it.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I remember my grandfather was a gardener, and like the weekly farming forecast was the Bible. You know, you couldn't
Yeah.
dare speak during the farming forecast because it was giving the longest range for the whole
Mm.
week, and that's kind of, you know, as I was saying, that's kind of something that I look at. So without getting into the isobars and hectopascals and looking at where like the shipping forecast or the sea area forecast is still very much like you just described, but the
Mm.
general forecasts aren't. But it's hard for Met Éireann to say it might be stormy next Saturday, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So in fairness to
Has
them,
to lay
whereas
out the evidence, and it also has to lay out the evidence in the most monotone voice possible. There can be no hint of any drama or
yeah,
emotion at any level. I mean, that's the other thing about weather forecasts, certainly in Ireland anyway, because in the UK, those of us who had the English channels when we were
hmm
kids, BBC, you know, Michael Fish and people like that, they'd sort of inject a little bit, now, not American levels
yeah,
of enthusiasm, but a little bit of it. And we should have quite a cold evening coming up in Bristol, that stuff like that.
hmm
Whereas our typical thing is, you know, and we see a warm front is approaching across the west coast and should reach. And it's slightly mesmerizing, but the number of times I've come through a full weather report and I don't actually remember anything that was said. It's just sort of been like music, like background noise.
yeah. See, to be fair to Met Éireann, I would defend them in this instance. They're trying to deliver a forecast for a whole
Mm,
island in the space of maybe 90 seconds or
mm.
180 seconds, you know, and to
It's
try
like
and
AA
do,
Road Watch for the whole country in 90
yeah,
seconds. Yeah.
and trying to do that, you know, in one quick update is really very difficult for them. And I suppose the problem is that we get so much centralized news and that, so they're trying to be the calm, consistent voice. So to be fair, I would
Mm,
I would understand that, but as I say, like I will often show the ECMWF weather model and the GFS weather model, and I'll say, look at this, the two of them are completely in disagreement as to what's going to happen next weekend. So if you're trying to plan for next weekend and you're looking at your weather apps, they're going to change every day, and that really can like give people an idea of why those weather apps are automatically updating, changing so frequently. But if
By
you
the way, just to call back there, ECM GFS, that's European and American, right?
no, ECMWF is the European Centre for Medium
Yeah.
Range Forecast. The GFS is the Global Forecast
The
System for the
global,
US.
right?
Yeah,
Okay, then
yeah.
that's US based.
Now,
Yeah.
the ECM does cover America, and actually around
Mm,
hurricane season, it gets really interesting because the Americans get really annoyed when the European weather model outperforms their weather model and
mm.
is better at forecasting the track of a hurricane, and that's actually really interesting. When hurricane season gets going now next month, it's really interesting to watch the track and the forecasts of those different weather models, and that's where you can see how they can differ. So you know, you can see a hurricane heading for a particular part of the US, and the weather app obviously will be showing that. But then all of a sudden, the turn that it takes is completely different, and the app will change. So they're more used to that, I suppose, than maybe than we are. And I think, like you're talking about drama, if you ever want to have a laugh, Google search thunder snow and look at a YouTube video of a US forecaster who was out in some really heavy snowfall with thunder, and he gets more excited than any of the Met-Éireann weather presenters have ever or will ever get, because he was live presenting during thunder snow, which is quite a rare thing. To get thunder and snow together is quite a rare thing. So you know, they dramatize it a lot more, and they inject, you know, a lot of kind of, I suppose, can be sensational. So we kind of don't want to go down that route either, because we don't want, you know, to turn into, oh my God, there's a wind coming, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's 60 kilometers an hour. It's not really.
Well, the closest I ever see to that is sometimes if you Google something, or if you go into Google News or search or whatever, you'll see there's a Dublin Live service, and whatever the weather is, they'll always bring it up a notch or two just to really, you know, give it socks. I kind of say it has to sort of work. You know, it works. I mean, I will sometimes click and they'll talk about a big freeze, or they'll talk
Mhm.
about, you know, kind of biblical floods
Yeah.
or whatever. And but I do wonder why there isn't a market for a more populist, slightly more show busy style weather service in Ireland.
Yeah, and you're right, because unfortunately a lot of my tweets get embedded into those articles, and obviously I have no control over the headline that goes in that. So I'll have a tweet that says it may turn rather unseasonable, you know, or it could be rather wet and windy at the weekend, and then the headline will be complete washout as weather warning is expected, or you know,
Batten down the hatches, folks.
yeah, and people then will see my tweet and they'll send me a message going, "You didn't say that," but I don't have control over how my tweets are embedded or used. But you're right,
Mm,
there probably is, you know, a little bit, but really and truly, Irish people vary so much. You know, what's wet and windy to you on an awful day, to somebody like a farmer who has to be out in it as well used to it, it's just a grand soft day with a bit of wind.
mm, mm,
So, you know, it really does depend on your outlook as well, because the weather extremes for you and for me maybe not so extreme for others. And then some people will message me absolutely terrified of winds and different things, and that you know, they won't go outside the house if there's a yellow weather warning, where other people will say yellow, it's only yellow, you know. So eh, when it comes to weather, it's a very emotive thing in Ireland as well, because everybody wants to have, you know, a say on the weather. And it wasn't that bad. Oh, no, you should have been up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You would have heard the wind, then it was howling, you know. So it's a very emotive topic as well, actually.
mm. In your 10 or 11 years then of kind of mapping all of this, have you noticed any change in the weather patterns here in Ireland?
Yeah, certainly. I think we've seen more extreme events, you know, and some of those, like Hurricane Ophelia was one that stands out. You know,
When
seen
was that again?
that was 20, was it 2018?
Okay.
I have to remember. Obviously, then as well, you know, it's kind of everywhere. So we've had drought, we've had, you know, quite warm, we've had 2010 snow and cold event, the 2018 storm Emma event. Um, Now, if you look back historically, you will find events that were, you know, more serious than those. But the number that we've seen in recent years does certainly, you know, support the trend of more extreme weather. The only thing is we do have to be very careful about mixing weather and climate, because,
Mm,
you know, if you're trying to get into a conversation about weather and climate, and somebody picks a fact from the 1800s and says, well, it was colder back then than it is now, or
mm,
it was warmer, you know, individual weather events don't make weather, you know, climate trends. So you have to be careful about that. You do need to look at the long-term trends, and the average temperature has been rising, but you will get months like April just gone, coldest
mm.
on record ever at Dublin.
It was a very cold month. Yeah,
Yeah,
April.
it's a cold. I mean, the Dublin airport records go back 78 years, and that was the
Mm.
coldest April in 78 years. So, you know, you have to be careful about how you use that kind of information,
But
because.
when people talk about, you know, hurricanes, floods, droughts, fires that we see in
Mhm.
places like California and Australia, and there is an association there with climate change, clearly, as in it is talked about in the same terms. I mean, is it fair to talk about it in those terms?
I think it's fair to talk about the frequency and how extreme they might be. So, if you get you get more extreme events more frequently, I think
Mm,
you can then talk about a trend. But picking out one of those individual events, I don't think
mm.
that helps anybody, because somebody can pick out an individual event from, 80 years ago before climate change was an issue and say, but back then we had a more extreme version. So I don't think any individual event, but certainly I think the trends can be used. And you do also have to be careful about statistics, because weather stations get moved around. Like, Kilkenny had a Met station for years and years and years, but due to urban sprawl, that got moved to Oak Park and Carlow. Now, they're not hugely far apart, but trying to compare those two when you're looking at a trend of zero point 0.1 degree or zero point 0.2 degree or zero point
Right.
0.3 degrees,
It could, yeah. There could be a point 0.1 or 0.2 degree of a difference
yeah,
there. Yeah.
you have to be careful, because even Dublin Airport, the station at Dublin Airport, because of developments, has moved around the
Mm.
airport, and very small changes in location can have a very small change, but that can have a big impact on a trend. So you could see zero point 0.2 of a degree a difference on average, but is that because it moved station? So you have to be very careful about
Or
statistics.
whether it's urban or rural, an area that becomes urbanized,
Yeah.
often at certain times of year it gets slightly warmer because of the heat coming from buildings, etc.
Yeah, more concrete, more buildings radiating heat, etc. And funnily enough, one of the questions I get about a lot of people from a lot of people is about getting a weather station, and where should I put it? And what I always say to people is the weather station in your back garden will tell you what the weather is in your back garden. So
Mm.
it may not be great for the general overall if you go out 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, but it is the weather in your back garden. So if you're surrounded by tall buildings and you get a warmer temperature in your back garden, well, then that's what the weather station is going to report. It doesn't mean that it's the same, 2 kilometers away and your weather station is showing. And that's why Met Éireann stations are generally put into an area that there are, nothing around them. For example, the Oak Park station is surrounded by fields. Dublin Airport, obviously the airport is a very open, so there is reasons for selecting those, but that doesn't mean you can't put a weather station in your back garden. And from a tech point of view, there's some really good weather stations out there now that you can put into your back garden, and like that, you can open up an app on your phone and you can see exactly what it is in your back garden any time of the day.
Mm. When again, just to ask you again about weather stations, I mean, is this something you can just buy online?
Yeah, yeah, you can. Yeah, there's loads of them now.
How big are
And
they? What does it look like?
they vary a lot. So some of them are kind of the real old kind of fashioned, have a little rain bucket, but has a tipping bucket that tips the rain, so records it, and then it has, a thermometer sensor, and it has a little, wind vane and wind anemometer that gives you those. And some of them have become a lot more kind of high tech. So there's one called Bloom Sky, which is kind of like, it's just a sensor. It's almost like maybe a Google Home type device that's outdoors, and it has sensors built in that will record, the temperature and the humidity and the barometer, and also it'll show you a live view of the sky, so you can see a webcam, so it has built in a view of it as well. So they do vary a lot, but there's
What
lots
what
of.
do you use now?
I have what's called a Davis Vantage Pro 2 Plus, which is a little bit more high spec, so it costs about 1,400 euro. It's got the same sensors. The only difference is the quality of the sensors. So if you get a cheap thermometer or a cheaper weather station and you put it out and the sun is hitting that sensor, the plastic around it's going to heat. So it's kind of like sometimes when you get into your car and you're not driving your car, the thermometer could say it's 25 degrees, but the Met local station will say it's only 19 or 20 degrees. So you have to be careful about how the sensors overheat. So the weather stations of Air News use what's called a very old Stevenson screen, which is basically woods with lats in it, lets the air in, but doesn't allow the sun to hit the sensor directly. Mine has something very similar. It has a shield. It's called a fan assisted radiation shield, or FARS. So it sucks the air up and basically gives you an
Jesus,
accurate temperature.
meteorology, you love your abbreviations and your acronyms, don't you?
I know it gets really nerdy really quick, but in general, it's just a higher quality station. But I also have a couple of webcams, and it's funny, a lot of people actually use the webcams now, including some of the hang gliders and paragliders that often message me, because they need to see the sky conditions, and the people want to see what it's like. And then I have people who
Where
email
do
me
hang gliders go from? I haven't seen any hang gliders.
Mount Leinster, so they use my weather station because it's quite near to Mount Leinster. My webcams actually
Is
face.
there like a cliff there you can just jump off, or is
They
it
they literally
sloping?
take a run and jump off the side of the mountain.
Wow. But
Yeah.
it's sheer enough that you can do that. It's not just a slope that
No,
you
no,
just.
it's yeah. I've often
Huh.
been up there and witnessed them doing it on a bank holiday Monday, and it's really impressive to see them. But they use the webcams for that. I also had a follower email me when the webcam stopped working from America because she enjoyed looking at the cows in the Irish fields, So it's
Wow.
but again it goes back to
I
forecasting.
see Twitch in your future. I see a Twitch stream with a monetizable Twitch stream. Actually, can you make any money from this? Do you make any money from this?
No, it's just a hobby. So the only thing at the
Why
moment
not,
is
Alan? I mean,
lots of people say that I am a brand ambassador for Auto Image Caro, who are a Renault and Dacia dealer. And I've actually been
Renault
driving
and Dacia.
and I've been driving a fully electric Zoe actually for the last couple of months, which is interesting because I last had an electric car in 2014 and the range has increased dramatically. So it's
How
nice to
much do
get
you
it.
get off the Zoe?
You get 300 easy. You get,
Kilometers.
yeah, yeah.
When you say 300 easy, what kind of driving are you talking about? I've never gotten 300 kilometers off an electric car. But go on.
Mixed driving. So a bit of kind of 100-kilometer roads, 80-kilometer roads, town driving. Not a lot of motorway driving now, to be fair, but a bit of motorway driving. Like I think the full range will be about 360, 380 kilometers. So you won't get that really if you're kind of driving it normally. But yeah, no, I've been really surprised by it actually.
And how quickly do you recharge it?
So I've been charging it overnight, which hasn't really been
Right.
kind of because I
But you
haven't.
haven't. So have you ever tried to recharge it in the public network?
Yeah, I went to the fast charger. It has the 50 kilowatt fast charger on it, so I was
Right.
able to get from around 30% to 80% in about
Mm.
30 minutes. It was pretty quick to be fair.
Even 30 minutes though. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Like the real thing is for me, I always said when we get to about 400 or 500 kilometers, when you don't have to worry
Yeah.
about charging other than once a day, really. But at the moment, even 300 kilometers, like the fact that I can drive to Dublin from Carlow and back without having to worry
Mm.
about a charge,
Oh, that's a big deal. Yeah.
that's a
That's.
big
I mean, if
change.
I'm driving to Mayo though, I mean, there
Yeah,
just isn't a car that will do it for me. Now people will say, "Oh, why don't you just get a Tesla?" I'm like, I don't have about 150 grand.
yeah. The only thing I'd say is
Uh,
that the granny cable, I've been using the granny cable actually.
mm,
And like that, if you're driving to the west and you're going to drive and you're going to stay you're not going to go too far away and you're going to charge overnight. To be fair, the granny cable does give you that option. They are
no,
expensive.
for sure. Yeah, expensive. And B, there's a lot of ifs there. I mean,
Hmm.
so my typical scenario would be I want to drive there. When I'm there, I often want to drive around the area, and that's very often 80, 100
Hmm.
kilometers a day.
Yeah,
I need flexibility,
yeah.
you know?
But the only thing is, if you did drive there and you did charge the granny cable for like 12 hours or more,
Mm.
like, and then you'd be able to top it up each day with the granny cable, it would be okay.
Oh
But
no, I mean absolutely, and there is a use case there. It's just there are a lot of there are quite a lot of restrictions in terms of what I can do now. Now, some of that is in my head because I have a car that sits in the driveway at the moment during the lockdown. For like 95% of the time, a
yeah.
little bit less when the lockdown ends. But um, I've wanted to buy an electric car. I'd say for certainly for 7 or 8 years. I was one of the
Hmm.
first people to test drive the Nissan Leaf.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved everything about it in terms of driving experience. Fantastic. Um, range, forget it. Absolute disaster.
Hmm.
Charging in public network, sorry, no. Even if I find a place that will charge it for me, there's about a 20 to 30% chance of somebody else is using it. So 30 minutes then goes to 60 minutes.
Yeah.
You know?
That has improved since they started charging for it. Now that everyone can't get it for free, they're not as
Mm.
busy as they were. But that is going to be a chicken and egg because the more electric cars to sell, then the more public infrastructure is going to be needed. So, yeah, no, it's certainly not. I think,
I think the nature of how we use cars will change with electric cars. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where, you be coming off the M1 motorway or the M7 or whatever, and there's a refueling station there, and there's 30 electric
Mhm.
charging. I mean, there may be, but I'm just not sure that people are going to be willing to hang around for
Yeah,
30 to 40 minutes each time. I just think as you said, be more planned. People
yeah,
will plan their journeys. That may be not a bad thing. I mean,
hmm,
there are a lot of things about motoring that are bad habits, but I don't think you can compare it to the relative freedom that you have now. That you just go anywhere at
hmm.
any time, night or day, you'll find somewhere where you can refuel. It's never a problem.
Yeah,
You know?
I had a Red Alt Kadjar, and you fill it up with diesel and you get 1,000 kilometers on the dash,
I'm
and you
pretty
can
much the
you can
same.
you
Yeah,
can drive that, empty it, and then in 5 minutes be back to 1,000. So
absolutely.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to compare. It's impossible for an electric car to match that.
And just last time, so how does a brand ambassador work? You get to drive around their car. Is that it?
Yeah, so essentially I drive around the car and I basically post some experiences with it, and
Uh
it's
huh.
often kind of in the photos I take. I take a lot of photography, a lot of drone photography, a lot of photography as part of Car to Weather as well. So the odd time you'll spot the car in it, really. But I try not to do too much. I don't kind of put it in your face too often. But
Have they drafted you into any ads yet? Like, do you have to do any of these like turning around? I use a Zoe.
no, thankfully not yet. Anyway, don't be giving them
Um,
ideas, Adrian.
that'd be funny. Anyway, look, Alan O'Reilly from Carlo Weather also works for Black Knight. Thank you very much for coming on the show today to talk mainly about weather apps, but also we got into a lot of other topics there. I know I'm going to get one or two narky emails from the electric car because I always do. Whenever I try and point out the potential negatives, there's this semi-religious kind of thing that comes back. Oh, you're obviously in the pay of the fossil fuel. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but that is all we have time for this week. So, from me, Adrian Weckler, tech editor of the Irish and Sunday Independent. Talk to you next week. Bye bye.